Hi class, and welcome to our presentation. We are Jared Mackey, Alex Griffith, and Steph Ogden, and we will be presenting on the Denver Airport software crisis. Next slide. So what is the Denver Airport software crisis? Needing a larger airport to become a more substantial hub, the Denver Airport around 1990 sought to expand and create an airport that would surpass capacity and technology. With this new expansion, an automated baggage handling system was proposed. This system would automate the destination, carrier, and carousel of each bag over the entire airport. With the proposed new automated baggage handling system, the aircraft turnaround time would be drastically reduced, and it would be the first of its kind. This system would be 10 times larger than any other technological system at that time. It seemed too good to be true. The Denver airport hired Breyer Neidl Petrone Associates to evaluate if the proposed baggage system was feasible. Breyer Neidl Petrone Associates reported that it could not be developed due to the complexity of the system. The Denver airport started construction anyway. This was just the beginning. Next slide.
So what happened with the Denver airport software crisis? It was a guided track system. The initial cost of it was supposed to be $186 million. It was scheduled to open October 31st, 1993, and it actually opened February 28th, 1995. It was 26 miles of track. And the system, so what happened with the system is that it wasn't sensing the carts, it wasn't sensing the brakes, so the minute timeline that was supposed to be in between each cart wasn't holding true. They didn't have the speeds they were supposed to travel, and the carts would fling the suitcases out of the telecarts, and the cars would also jump the tracks around corners and sometimes from one track to another track. This also created crashes among the telecars, which in turn created the rails to be bent. The bent rails then caused even more crashes, which ended up being a vicious cycle in which the more they ran the system, the more the system would break down, obviously, making it more of a disaster and even worse when they ran it. Bags, they said, were literally chewed up by the system, and people reported that clothes were like popcorn flying through the air in spurts. Next slide, please. So this is a chart of kind of the history and the timeline of what happened when it happened. In 1987, I guess the system was proposed. By 1991, they asked 16 companies and invited them to bid on what the system would cost. They only had 3 offers come back to them. In 1992, the proposal to BAE Automated Systems was a $175.6 million contract. By 1994, the project and the system had already been postponed 4 times. You can see by April in 1994, the catastrophic system test was in public. They didn't have enough time to really test it before it was released, so it just failed hugely with the whole world really watching. By 1995, they finalized the opening, and only one airline was willing to go ahead and adopt this system and test it out. I believe that was United, but by 2005, they fully transferred back to a manual system. Next slide, please. Okay, so why did this happen? They ignored the warnings of what should be changed by the system matter experts and why certain parts of the system should be changed. It was way too complex. There was actually another system in Munich, Germany that was similar to it, but on a much smaller scale and very much less complicated. Munich built their system in 2 years, and they did 6 months of testing before they released it to the public. When the proposal was originally pitched to the Denver airport stakeholders by BAE, there was some misleading information. It was oversimplified, and all the different airlines were not involved until about halfway through the project had already began. Next slide, please. The stakeholders wanted carts for oversized luggage, for ski racks, etc., things that their customers needed, but the software engineers didn't want to accommodate. So they also noticed that there was no plan B, side tracks, for example, for when carts had been damaged or weren't working properly. There was no backup plan. And instead of testing one concourse at a time, like I mentioned before, they ran them all at once, which caused a lot of issues. Next slide, please. So the factors leading to the project's failure were poor project planning, poor analysis of project requirements, poor implementation of resources, lost focus on goal of project. The project was way over cost, and then project delay after project delay after project delay. Next slide, please.
So just to recap, the project, of the significance of the failure, the project ran over budget by almost 30%, with an actual cost of $250 million versus $195 million planned. Also, the airport couldn't be open and was delayed the opening by 18 months. The carts were unable to cope with the sharp corners in the track, as mentioned. And not only was there a big problem in the system, as they tried to maintain it, that also cost millions of dollars. And in August 2005, the system was scrapped altogether, and they went to manually doing it. And because of the delay, each day that the system wasn't completed, the airport had to pay another $1 million. So because of the delay, it cost an extra $560 million in the airport. Next slide. Lessons learned. I think the main lessons to be learned were: listen when people say this isn't going to work. 2, don't wait to involve all parties affected by the project. And 3, beware of big projects meant to change the world. To expound on listen when people say this isn't going to work, as already mentioned, the city of Denver hired Needle Patron Associates to evaluate the proposed baggage system project was possible, and the company stated that it was not. It was too complex. And there were only 3 proposals, and all of them said they wouldn't be able to finish the project within the allotted time frame. And not only that, but the senior managers of BAE Systems expressed concern with project's complexity and estimated a 4-year timeline instead of 2. Next slide. Don't wait to involve all parties affected in the project. So from the beginning, key stakeholders were excluded from the initial design making and design meetings. Not only that, once the airlines were finally asked for their opinions, they required major changes from the project team, adding new ski equipment racks and different handling for oversized luggage and things like that. Next slide. The last lesson learned was beware of big projects meant to change the world. So when they went out with the software, they did it in all 3 sections, whereas they could have done it in 1 section at a time, incremental rollout. The BAE system should have tested the new automated system in sections to make sure it would work before implementing it throughout the rest of the airport. So some other lessons, I guess, that could be learned was: do not underestimate complexity or size of project. Good planning is key to not cause changes to strategy. Huge amounts of pressure can affect everyone. Making firm commitments is a huge part to avoid massive risk and uncertainty. Failure to perform risk management can mean knowing and not knowing whether a system will work properly. It is important to understand the implication that change request might have. and make sure that you take expert advice. Two quotes that I think fit well for this situation. I'll just read the first one. We are often faced with situations in which we lack the prior experience to know how to proceed with certainty. The way in which we respond to those situations can spell the difference between success and failure. So as we've learned from the Denver airport, when faced with situations and decisions, if they're done with certainty, then they have a better chance of success. These are our sources. And that's it. Thank you.